it feels impossible that people choose to live here, 800 miles from the North Pole, in a place where the sun disappears for months and the dark does not blink. Svalbard sits between mainland Norway and the Arctic ice, a scattering of islands suspended in the coldest reaches of the inhabited world. From above, it looks less like land and more like a fracture in the ocean. Jagged coastlines bitten by glaciers, mountains rising sharply from frozen seas. The Arctic Ocean presses in from the north. Greenland lies far to the west. Norway feels distant, almost symbolic. And beyond Svalbard, there is nothing but drifting ice and the curvature of the Earth bending toward the pole. It is a geography defined by exposure. There are no forests to soften the wind, no hills thick with soil to absorb the cold, only rock, snow, and ice shaped by millennia of pressure. The islands stretch across roughly the same latitude as northern Greenland, higher than most of Alaska. Here, the planet reveals its skeletal structure. And yet, in this stark landscape, lights glow in winter. Windows shine against the polar night. Snowmobiles carve lines across frozen valleys. Children walk to school beneath an aurora-lit sky. The largest settlement, Longyearbyen, rests along the edge of Adventfjorden, a narrow ribbon of colored buildings pressed between mountains and sea. Fewer than 3,000 people live here. That number shifts with the seasons. Researchers arrive, workers depart, tourists step briefly into the cold and then retreat south, but a core remains. They endure darkness that lasts from October until February. They endure daylight that never fades from April to August. Living here means accepting extremes not as events, but as rhythms. In winter, the sun sinks below the horizon and does not return for more than 100 days. Temperatures fall well below freezing. The air becomes so dry it feels brittle. Sound carries differently in the cold, as if the atmosphere itself has tightened. Footsteps on snow echo sharply. The crack of distant ice travels across valleys, yet the darkness is not empty. The sky often blooms with green and violet ribbons of aurora. Stars burn with startling clarity. Moonlight reflects off snowfields, creating a pale blue glow that softens the terrain. It is a different kind of light, one that asks for patience. Then comes summer. The midnight sun rises and simply refuses to set. For 4 months, shadows spin in slow circles but never disappear. Glaciers gleam beneath constant daylight. Seabirds scream along cliffs without rest. Human sleep patterns blur. Curtains thicken. Time feels elastic. The land does not negotiate with comfort. Permafrost lies beneath every step, ground that has remained frozen for thousands of years. Buildings stand on stilts to prevent heat from melting the soil beneath them. Roads shift. Pipelines rest above ground, exposed to the elements like fragile veins. Even the cemetery is frozen. Bodies cannot decompose in the hardened earth. It is not only cold that defines Svalbard, but distance. Supplies arrive by ship and plane. Fresh produce travels thousands of miles. Medical emergencies require evacuation to mainland Norway. The nearest large city feels abstract, almost theoretical. Here, self-reliance is not romantic, it is required. Beyond the settlement, polar bears roam the coastline and drift ice. There are more bears than people across the archipelago. Leaving town without a rifle is discouraged. The boundary between human habitation and wild territory is thin, invisible, constantly shifting. Standing at the edge of Longyearbyen, the contrast becomes clear. On one side, warm light spills from CAFs and research stations. On the other, glaciers loom in silence. The mountains appear close enough to touch, yet crossing them requires planning, equipment, and respect. Weather can change within minutes. Winds descend from ice fields with sudden force. Snow hides crevasses that open like concealed doors. Why stay here? Why choose a life so far from convenience, from warmth, from the familiar patterns of temperate seasons? For some, it is work. Svalbard hosts research stations studying climate change, glaciology, atmospheric science. The Arctic reveals planetary processes in their rawest form. Ice cores hold records of ancient air. The retreat of glaciers marks the pace of warming with unsettling clarity. Scientists come to measure, to witness, to understand. For others, it is a desire for proximity to the edge, a longing for space. The horizon here feels larger, less obstructed by human design. Silence carries weight. The landscape demands attention. There is also a history woven into these valleys. Coal mining once drove the settlement's growth. Dark seams of carbon were extracted from beneath the mountains, fueling distant cities. Rusted equipment still stands against snowfields, reminders of industrial ambition meeting Arctic reality. But the future of Svalbard is uncertain. The climate warms faster here than almost anywhere else on Earth. Sea ice retreats, glaciers thin, avalanches have reshaped parts of the town. Buildings have been relocated, infrastructure adjusted. The ground itself shifts as permafrost softens. Living 800 miles from the North Pole is not a static achievement. It is a continuous negotiation with change. As the polar night approaches each year, residents prepare. Snowmobiles are tuned. Food stocks increase. Social gatherings become more frequent. Community matters deeply when darkness stretches long. Isolation can weigh heavily on the unprepared. And still, when the first hint of returning sunlight brushes the mountaintops in February, people gather outside. They watch the ridge glow pink for the first time in months. It is a small moment, quiet, but it carries immense relief. Svalbard is not merely a remote outpost. It is a threshold between the inhabited world and the vast Arctic expanse beyond. A place where human presence feels provisional, almost temporary, against geological time. And as the sea ice drifts northward and the sun arcs low along the horizon, one question lingers in the cold air. How long can a community endure at the edge of a warming world? The mountains do not rise gently here. They erupt from the sea like the exposed bones of the earth, sharp ridges cutting into a sky that often feels too wide for comfort. Svalbard's landscape is a study in restraint. Color exists, but sparingly. In winter, the palette narrows to white, blue, and the iron gray of distant peaks. Snow settles into every crease of rock, softening edges yet revealing structure. Wind sculpts drifts into smooth, wave-like forms that resemble frozen oceans suspended mid-motion. Glaciers dominate the interior. Vast rivers of ice pour slowly from high plateaus toward the sea, their surfaces fractured by crevasses that glow a deep, luminous turquoise. These glaciers are not static monuments, they move, imperceptibly to the eye, yet relentlessly over decades. They grind stone into powder. They carve valleys into broad U-shaped troughs. They shape the islands with cold precision. At the face of a tidewater glacier, the scale becomes overwhelming. Walls of ice tower above dark Arctic water, streaked with sediment carried from ancient rock. Occasionally, a crack echoes across the fjord. A section collapses. Ice thunders into the sea, sending waves outward in slow, heavy pulses. The sound lingers long after the splash subsides. The fjords cut deep into the land, creating narrow corridors of still water between steep mountains. In summer, their surfaces mirror the sky with near-perfect clarity. In winter, they freeze into shifting mosaics of pack ice, fractured by tides and currents. Standing at the edge of one of these fjords, the silence feels immense. Even the wind seems careful. Beyond the settlements, there are no roads connecting one community to another. Travel happens by boat in summer, by snowmobile or dog sled in winter. The land remains largely unmarked by infrastructure. No highways thread across valleys, no power lines stretch across ridgelines. The terrain resists convenience. Yet within this severity, subtle details emerge. In the brief Arctic summer, snow retreats from lower slopes, revealing tundra that blooms with unexpected life. Mosses and lichens spread across damp ground in muted greens and oranges. Tiny Arctic flowers push through thin soil, their petals delicate but determined. For a few short weeks, insects hum in sheltered pockets. Migratory birds return in vast numbers, filling cliffs with sound. The cliffs along the western coast become vertical cities of seabirds. Thousands nest on narrow ledges, their cries constant, their wings flashing white against dark rock. Below them, the sea churns with life drawn north by nutrient-rich currents. Even here, in a place defined by cold, ecosystems pulse with activity. But the land's generosity is brief. By late August, temperatures begin to fall. The light softens. Snow dusts the peaks once more. The tundra browns and then disappears beneath frost. The cycle resets with quiet inevitability. There is a tension in this landscape between fragility and force. On one hand, the tundra can be damaged by a single careless footprint, scars lasting decades in slow-growing soil. On the other, avalanches roar down mountainsides with unstoppable power, reshaping slopes in seconds. The same valley can feel both delicate and dangerous. Weather governs everything. Storms arrive from the Greenland Sea with little warning. Winds accelerate through fjords, funneling between peaks and lifting snow into blinding curtains. Visibility can vanish within minutes. In such moments, orientation becomes difficult. The horizon dissolves. Up and down lose meaning. For those traveling beyond town, preparation is ritual. Layers of insulated clothing, emergency beacons, knowledge of terrain. Each journey demands respect. The landscape rewards awareness and punishes complacency. And yet, amid this discipline, beauty persists in understated ways. There are evenings when the low sun skims the horizon, casting long shadows that stretch for miles. The light turns mountains gold, then rose, then a soft violet, before fading into twilight. Reflections ripple across calm water. The air becomes still, almost suspended. In winter darkness, when the aurora appears, it transforms the entire sky into motion. Curtains of green drift overhead, sometimes flickering rapidly, sometimes moving with slow elegance. The snow reflects the glow, and for a moment the land feels less isolated, as if connected to something vast and unseen above. But even as these moments inspire awe, the land carries signs of change. Glaciers that once reached farther into fjords have retreated, exposing fresh rock and sediment. Ice that used to seal certain waters year-round now breaks earlier in spring. Permafrost that once felt immovable softens in places, destabilizing slopes. The changes are subtle year to year, yet undeniable over time. Researchers measure, compare, document. Instruments stand on windswept ridges collecting data on temperature, wind, and atmospheric composition. Small Huts house sensors recording seismic shifts within glaciers. The Arctic serves as an early signal, amplifying global trends. There is a quiet urgency here, embedded in the ice itself. Standing alone on a ridge above Longyearbyen, the view stretches across Adventfjorden toward distant peaks. The town appears small, almost fragile against the scale of the valley. A handful of buildings in a sweep of white. Beyond them, miles of untouched terrain. It becomes clear that the land does not bend to human intention. It allows presence, cautiously. It sets the terms. In this place, distance is not measured only in miles, but in exposure. From here to the North Pole lies open water and drifting ice, 800 miles of shifting Arctic expanse, no permanent settlements, no shelter beyond what one carries. And as the wind moves across the plateau, carving patterns into fresh snow, another question surfaces quietly beneath the vast sky. What does it mean to build a life in a place that was never meant to be owned? In the stillness beyond the last streetlight, survival belongs first to those who were here long before any human footprint pressed into the snow. A polar bear moves across sea ice with deliberate patience, its massive body surprisingly silent against the frozen surface. Each step is calculated, each pause deliberate. The bear's world is defined by scent and sound, by the faint trace of a seal's breath beneath the ice. In Svalbard, this predator stands at the top of the food chain, powerful yet vulnerable to the thinning ice that supports its hunt. There are more polar bears across the archipelago than people. Their presence is not symbolic. It is immediate, real. Venturing beyond settlement boundaries requires vigilance. Rifles are carried not as trophies, but as precaution. Encounters are rare, but the possibility shapes behavior. The wilderness does not separate itself politely from human life. In spring, ringed seals haul out onto stable ice, carving breathing holes through thick layers with their claws. Beneath them, Arctic cod drift in cold, nutrient-rich waters. Ivory gulls circle overhead, their white feathers blending seamlessly into snow-covered horizons. Every species here is adapted with precision. Thick fur, dense feathers, slow metabolisms, timing that aligns with narrow windows of abundance. Reindeer move across the tundra with quiet endurance. Smaller than their mainland relatives, Svalbard reindeer carry compact bodies built for conserving heat. In winter, they scrape snow aside with their hooves, searching for lichen frozen beneath the crust. Their survival depends on access to food that may lie buried under layers of ice formed by sudden thaws and refreezes. A single winter storm can seal the ground in a sheet too hard to break. Arctic foxes follow the rhythm of opportunity. In summer, their coats turn brown to match exposed earth. In winter, they become almost invisible against the snow. They trail polar bears at a distance, feeding on scraps left behind. They den in rocky slopes, raising litters during the brief months of relative warmth. Life here is not dramatic in the way of tropical abundance. It is measured, economical. Every calorie matters. Every movement conserves energy. Humans, too, adapt. The earliest recorded visitors to Svalbard were likely whalers and trappers in the 17th century, drawn by the promise of oil and fur. Dutch and English expeditions navigated icy waters in wooden ships, anchoring in fjords that had never known the sound of hammer on nail. They hunted bowhead whales until populations collapsed. They overwintered in small huts, relying on limited supplies and the uncertain mercy of weather. Remnants of those early ventures still stand along remote shorelines. Weathered wooden structures lean into the wind, their beams darkened by centuries of exposure. Rusted tools lie half-buried in gravel. These artifacts are preserved not by intention, but by cold. Decay slows in frozen air. In the early 20th century, coal mining took hold. Settlements expanded. Workers from mainland Norway and beyond arrived to extract black seams from beneath mountains that seemed immovable. Mines tunneled into rock. Conveyor belts carried coal toward waiting ships. The industry shaped Longyearbyen's identity for decades. Life for miners was demanding. Darkness in winter, constant light in summer. Avalanches and accidents posed real threats. Yet families formed, schools opened, community traditions emerged. The Arctic ceased to be merely a frontier and became a home. Today, mining has largely declined, replaced by research, tourism, and satellite operations. But the memory of extraction lingers in the town's architecture and culture. Old cable lines stretch across valleys like skeletal reminders of industrial ambition. A few inactive mine entrances still puncture mountainsides, sealed but visible. Human survival here depends on structure and cooperation. Buildings are designed to withstand shifting ground. Snow fences line certain slopes to reduce avalanche risk. Emergency drills prepare residents for encounters with wildlife or extreme storms. There is no illusion of dominance over nature. Even daily routines adjust to Arctic conditions. Groceries arrive by ship or plane, stocked carefully against weather disruptions. Fresh vegetables can be expensive and sporadic. Energy is managed thoughtfully. Social gatherings become anchors during the polar night, offering warmth that counters isolation. Children grow up understanding that leaving town without preparation carries risk. They learn to recognize weather patterns, to respect warnings, to move deliberately across icy ground. For them, rifles stored in communal lockers are not symbols of aggression, but tools of awareness. And yet, despite preparation, vulnerability remains. Climate shifts ripple through ecosystems. Warmer winters can bring rain instead of snow, creating ice layers that block reindeer from food. Sea ice forms later, reducing hunting grounds for polar bears. Species that once thrived under predictable cycles now navigate uncertainty. Researchers monitor these changes with increasing concern. Tracking collars record animal movements. Satellite imagery measures ice extent. Data accumulates year after year, revealing patterns difficult to ignore. The Arctic is warming at more than twice the global average. Here, consequences appear quickly. In late autumn, as darkness returns, wildlife adjusts once more. Polar bears roam coastlines searching for stable ice. Foxes thicken their coats. Reindeer cluster in sheltered valleys. Humans check equipment, reinforce routines. There is a shared resilience across species, though expressed differently. Instinct guides one, knowledge guides the other. Both rely on timing, on reading subtle cues in wind and temperature. Standing at the boundary where town lights fade into open land, the contrast sharpens. Behind, warmth and human structure. Ahead, an expanse governed by ancient rules. Somewhere in the darkness, a bear moves unseen. The question lingers, carried on the cold wind. In a place where survival has always required adaptation, How much change can the balance endure before it tips beyond recovery? When the darkness stretches unbroken for months, culture becomes more than tradition, it becomes insulation. In Longyearbyen, community life does not fade with the sun. It adjusts. Windows glow warmly against the polar night, and inside those buildings, people gather with intention. Shared meals stretch longer. Conversations deepen. Music drifts through wooden halls. The absence of daylight sharpens the value of presence. There are no indigenous populations native to Svalbard. Every resident, past and present, arrived from somewhere else. That absence shapes identity here. Belonging is not inherited, it is chosen. The community is built from Norwegians, Russians, Ukrainians, Thais, Swedes, Germans, and dozens of other nationalities who have traveled north for work, research, or the simple desire to live differently. This mixture creates a quiet cultural layering. Norwegian remains the dominant language in Longyearbyen, yet accents shift from one CAF table to the next. International researchers share offices. Children from different continents sit side by side in schoolrooms where Arctic safety lessons are as common as mathematics. A few hours away by snowmobile lies Barentsburg, a Russian-operated settlement established during the Soviet era. Its architecture contrasts with the colorful wooden houses of Longyearbyen. Concrete buildings stand firm against the wind. A statue of Lenin faces the harbor, unchanged by decades. Russian flags ripple in Arctic gusts. Coal mining continues here at a smaller scale, maintaining a link to Svalbard's industrial past. Despite political differences elsewhere in the world, daily life on these islands tends toward cooperation. Search and rescue operations do not pause for nationality. Scientific projects often cross borders. The Arctic, vast and demanding, encourages practical collaboration. At the heart of Longyearbyen stands a modest church, red against white snow. It remains open at all hours, offering quiet space for reflection regardless of belief. During the polar night, candles flicker inside, while wind presses against the walls. Services are attended not only for faith, but for connection. In a place where isolation can creep silently, shared rituals matter. One of the most symbolic structures lies tucked into a mountainside near the airport, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Built deep within permafrost, it stores duplicate samples of seeds from around the world. Millions of tiny packages representing agricultural diversity are preserved behind thick steel doors. The vault is not intended for daily use. It is a safeguard, a repository for humanity's future in case of catastrophe. There is something profoundly fitting about this location. 800 miles from the North Pole, in a landscape shaped by ice and time, the world's food heritage rests quietly. The frozen ground provides natural stability. The remoteness offers security. It is an act of foresight anchored in one of the planet's most fragile environments. Yet even this vault has faced challenges. In recent years, unusual warmth caused melting permafrost near its entrance, prompting engineering adjustments. The Arctic's reliability can no longer be assumed. The symbolism deepens. Even our safeguards must adapt. Culture here is intertwined with awareness. Festivals mark the return of the sun in February, when the first rays touch the mountaintop overlooking town. Residents gather outdoors, bundled against the cold, to celebrate light's slow return. In summer, the midnight sun inspires long hikes and boat trips beneath skies that refuse darkness. Daily habits shift with the seasons. Sleep masks hang by bedroom windows in June. In December, headlamps become extensions of the body. The rhythm of work bends around available light. The environment shapes psychology in subtle ways. Some struggle with the darkness, feeling its weight press inward. Others find clarity in its simplicity, a narrowing of distraction. There are no trees here, no rustling leaves to soften wind, yet identity grows in other forms. It appears in shared resilience, in humor about weather forecasts that rarely predict perfectly. It appears in the way residents speak of going south as if leaving a separate realm entirely. Children raised here often describe a childhood marked by freedom, the absence of traffic lights, the proximity of open land, the familiarity with snowmobiles and sled dogs. At the same time, boundaries are clear. No one forgets the presence of wildlife. No one ignores avalanche warnings. The tension between past and present lingers beneath everyday life. Abandoned mining equipment rests in valleys as quiet memorials to earlier ambitions. New research stations rise with modern design and global funding. Tourism brings visitors eager to witness Arctic extremes, their cameras capturing glaciers and bears. With tourism comes responsibility. Guides emphasize environmental protection. Strict regulations limit disturbance to wildlife. Footprints are monitored. The balance between sharing the Arctic and preserving it is delicate. As climate change accelerates visible transformation, the emotional stakes increase. Residents witness shifting coastlines, warmer winters, heavier rainfall. They adapt infrastructure, reinforce slopes, modify building codes. Yet adaptation carries uncertainty. How much will change in a decade? In a generation? Identity here is inseparable from environment. To live in Svalbard is to accept proximity to both beauty and vulnerability. It is to acknowledge that permanence may be an illusion. Communities form not because the land is easy, but because it is compelling. On a quiet winter evening, as aurora light ripples faintly above the fjord and the town settles into darkness, there is a sense of shared endurance. Inside warm rooms, laughter rises softly. Outside, wind moves snow across empty streets. The Arctic does not promise comfort, it offers clarity. And within that clarity, another question forms. If the land itself is changing, how will the culture rooted in its extremes evolve alongside it? The horizon here feels closer to space than to the rest of Earth. From the edge of a frozen fjord, looking northward across drifting ice, the imagination stretches beyond ordinary maps. 800 miles separates Svalbard from the North Pole, yet the distance feels less like measurement and more like direction, a pull toward something vast and elemental. There are no cities beyond this line, no highways, only shifting sea ice, cold currents, and the slow rotation of the planet beneath a low Arctic sun. Living here reshapes perspective. In most places, human design dominates the landscape. Towers rise higher than hills. Roads cut through forests. Light erases the stars. But in Svalbard, human presence remains proportionally small. Buildings cluster tightly, as if seeking reassurance from one another. Beyond them, the land resumes control almost immediately. That imbalance carries meaning. It reminds residents, quietly but persistently, that survival here is borrowed. The Arctic permits habitation, but it does not guarantee it. Each generation inherits not ownership, but stewardship. The glaciers predate every structure in Longyearbyen. The mountains will outlast them. And yet, despite its severity, Svalbard does not feel hostile. It feels honest. Weather does not disguise itself. Cold announces its arrival sharply against exposed skin. Wind reveals its direction across drifting snow. Darkness settles without apology. In return, the land offers moments of startling clarity. A sun halo suspended in ice crystals, a perfectly still reflection of mountains in summer water, the faint crackle of aurora overhead. Such moments recalibrate scale. Problems carried from elsewhere shrink slightly beneath the vast sky. Time stretches differently when measured against glaciers that have advanced and retreated for millennia. The pace of modern life slows, replaced by awareness of season and light. There is humility in that adjustment. The people who remain here year after year often speak not of conquering the Arctic, but of listening to it. They track snow conditions before planning a journey. They respect warning signs posted at avalanche-prone slopes. They understand that even small miscalculations can have consequences amplified by isolation. Isolation itself carries paradox. Though geographically remote, Svalbard is deeply connected to the world. Satellites orbit overhead, transmitting data from research stations to universities thousands of miles away. The seed vault safeguards crops from continents that may never see snow. Scientists here contribute to global understanding of climate systems, ocean currents, atmospheric chemistry. In this way, the archipelago functions both as frontier and crossroads. It sits at the edge of habitability while participating in international networks of knowledge and cooperation. The Arctic becomes not only a distant place, but a mirror reflecting planetary change. As sea ice retreats and glaciers thin, the landscape tells a story that extends far beyond these islands. The changes observed here foreshadow shifts elsewhere: rising seas, altered weather patterns, disrupted ecosystems. Svalbard stands as both witness and warning. Yet daily life continues with grounded practicality. Children attend school. Groceries are stocked. Boats depart in summer, carrying tourists eager to glimpse polar bears against ice floes. Researchers recalibrate instruments after storms. Snowplows clear streets during blizzards. There is resilience in repetition. In February, when the first full sunrise returns after months of absence, the town pauses. Light spills over the mountain ridge, casting a pale glow across rooftops. It lasts only minutes at first. But those minutes feel expansive. Faces turn upward, conversations quiet. The return of the sun is not dramatic, it is deeply felt. By June, under constant daylight, hikers move across valleys at midnight, their shadows stretching long across tundra. Sleep becomes secondary to opportunity. The landscape opens, revealing textures hidden during winter. Meltwater streams carve temporary paths through gravel. Birds circle above cliffs alive with nesting colonies. The cycle continues. Darkness returns. Ice reforms. Seasons overlap in memory. For visitors, Svalbard often feels like an expedition, a journey to the edge of the map. For residents, it becomes something subtler, a place of chosen constraint, a community defined not by convenience, but by intention. To live 800 miles from the North Pole is to accept that nature sets the baseline. It is to find balance in extremes. It is to witness climate change not as abstraction, but as lived experience. And it is to understand that remoteness does not mean irrelevance. Standing once more at the water's edge, watching broken sea ice drift slowly northward, the scale of silence feels immense. Wind brushes lightly across the surface. A distant glacier creaks as it shifts. Beyond the horizon lies the pole, unseen, unreachable from here, without days of travel across uncertain ice. Yet its presence is felt in the cold clarity of the air, in the arc of the sun tracing low across the sky. Svalbard endures between worlds, between darkness and light, between permanence and and perhaps that is its quiet lesson. At the edge of the earth, where human ambition meets ancient ice, survival is not about dominance. It is about alignment, about learning the contours of a landscape that owes us nothing, yet offers perspective in return. The Arctic does not ask to be conquered. It asks to be understood. And in that understanding, beneath a sky that shifts from midnight blue to endless gold, one truth settles gently into the cold air. The farther we travel toward the planet's extremes, the more clearly we see our place within it.